Today is my 5th wedding anniversary with Grace Wong. I prepared a gift and a candlelit dinner to surprise her. However, she volunteered to be a nude model to help her first love, Michael Fu, succeed at an art exhibition. When I arrived at the venue, she was only wearing her underwear. She saw me and asked, "Honey, what are you doing here?" Michael was very angry. He questioned, "Who let you in? You've ruined my inspiration." Grace immediately tried to calm him down and then turned to me, saying, "Honey, you shouldn't have interrupted us. We're in the middle of a creative process. You should apologize to Michael." Michael scoffed and said, "There's no need for that. Someone who doesn't understand artistic creation wouldn't give a sincere apology anyway. Grace, when you talk to him about art creation, he might not understand what you're saying at all." Grace looked at me and said, "Honey, you go home first. I'll explain it to you later." I smiled and turned to leave. It's a divorce, so there's no need for an explanation anyway. I took out my phone and canceled the reservation for the couple's room. Seeing the reason for the cancellation, I couldn't help but smile wryly. Michael was right, I truly don't understand art, but I know that no man would accept his wife being a nude model. I met Grace in college. Before I met her, I never believed in love at first sight, but that day I knew I was drawn to her. With just one glance, she became the one for the rest of my life. She is a year older than me and is my senior in the external relations department. I've never been good at communicating with strangers, but for her, I decided to join the department. My friends were quite surprised and advised me to be cautious, suggesting that I should take my time. I didn't explain myself. Instead, I pushed through and learned how to communicate with vendors, practicing my speaking skills in solitude every morning. Later, Grace became the head of the external relations department, and I was promoted to vice president, which allowed me to interact with her more frequently. Seeing her smile every day brings me great satisfaction. When she graduated from college, I confessed my feelings to her, but she turned me down because of Michael. However, I have never been able to forget her. After graduating from college, I moved to the city where she lived and learned that Michael had left her to pursue his artistic dreams. I comforted her and stayed by her side during those difficult times. My relationship with her went smoothly from dating to marriage. I knew she still had feelings for Michael, but I didn't mind too much. I believed that as long as I treated her well, she would eventually forget him. However, I was wrong. After 5 years of marriage, I treated her just as I always had, even doubling my efforts, but her heart remained untouched. I really don't understand. Is first love really that hard to forget? Or have all my efforts over the years been in vain? My heart hurts so much, and I feel an unprecedented exhaustion. Grace, I'm tired and I no longer love you. I returned home, set aside the prepared gift, and sat alone at the dining table, eating a cold candlelit dinner. Grace returned home, excitedly running up to me with a gift. "Honey, look what I got for you." She happily pulled out a 4090 graphics card. "You've always wanted one, right? Today is our 5th wedding anniversary, and I specifically prepared it for you." My heart is filled with bitterness. She always does this. After making a mistake, she tries to make amends with gifts. The graphics card is something I've always wanted, but now that it's right in front of me, I can't feel happy about it. I force a smile, and Grace exaggerates while pointing at the dishes on the table, saying, "Wow, honey, is this the candlelit dinner you made for me? I am really happy." She picked up a piece of sweet and sour ribs and put it in her mouth, only to spit it out. "Why is it cold?" "Honey, I'll heat it up." "No need," I shook my head. "The dish can be reheated when it gets cold, but my heart, which is completely chilled, can never be warmed again." "Honey, are you still angry? Please don't be upset anymore. Okay?" Grace squatted down in front of me and looked at me with her big, sparkling eyes. This always works for her. In the past, no matter how angry I was, as long as I saw her bright eyes, my mood would improve. "Honey, let me explain. There's nothing between Michael and me. He just lacks confidence about the art exhibition, and I went to encourage him. As for being a nude model, that's part of artistic creation. Don't think too much about it. Again, it's about artistic creation. As my wife, can she really stand in front of Michael without any concerns, completely disregarding my feelings? Honey, you really shouldn't have come today. Michael places a lot of importance on this art exhibition. It relates to his future, and artistic creativity is most sensitive to interruptions. So, you mean I should apologize to Michael? I stared at Grace in disbelief. She actually thinks I am in the wrong. She never considered herself my wife rather than Michael's girlfriend. An apology wasn't necessary. Before coming back, Michael generously said it was fine. I could only chuckle at my own expense. Michael was generous, which made me look like the petty one. I silently ate the cold rice in my bowl, but oddly enough, I didn't feel the rice was cold at all. After finishing my meal, I put down my chopsticks and said, I still have work to take care of, so you should go to bed early. Grace was taken aback. I had never let her sleep alone before. She was afraid of being in the bedroom by herself. For the past 5 years of our marriage, I had always stayed with her in the living room until she fell asleep, and only then would I carry her back to the bedroom. I walked into the study and turned on the computer to check the company's files. I heard footsteps outside the door. Grace opened the study door and placed a ticket on the desk. Tomorrow is Michael's art exhibition, and he has invited us to attend. When I saw the ticket, I couldn't help but give a slight smirk, feeling somewhat indifferent. Grace persuaded me. Michael means no harm. In this city, we are his only 2 friends, and he hopes we can witness his success. I looked at Grace and asked if she wanted to go. Grace nodded, indicating that she wanted to see Michael's success for herself and put his past to rest. For Michael's success, Grace even allowed him to showcase her nude portrait, letting many people view it while she also went to see it herself. I really can't understand what Grace is thinking. Maybe this is the art that I just can't grasp. What about you? Grace looks at me expectantly. I have to admit that I don't understand your art, nor do I wish to understand it. Before Grace and I got divorced, she was still my wife. I couldn't accept that my wife was being judged by others while I remained indifferent. I have work commitments tomorrow and won't be able to go. Grace wanted to continue persuading me, but I interrupted her. Is there anything else? If not, please step out for now. I have work to do. I continued, I'm here with you. I don't need that. You should sleep. I'll be busy until late. Grace said, her eyes filled with tears and her face filled with grievance as she walked away. I didn't pay her much attention and opened my computer to check the new emails. One read, Mr. Lee, your case has been taken over by a lawyer. When would you have time to meet for a discussion? I replied to the email, tomorrow. The meeting with the lawyer went smoothly. This is because Grace and I have no financial disputes. The house, the car, and the savings are all in her name. The lawyer proposed 2 options. I chose to go with a divorce by agreement, and the lawyer would help me draft the divorce agreement, aiming to secure the maximum benefits, although he couldn't guarantee that I would get half of the assets. The other option was to go through legal proceedings, where, considering Grace's infidelity in the marriage, I might be able to claim more than half of the property. However, taking into account the 5 years of our relationship, I decided not to get entangled over the assets. After leaving the law firm, I received a call from Grace. Husband, come back soon. I've made a lot of delicious food. I was taken aback. You cooked? After 5 years of marriage, Grace had never stepped into the kitchen. Yes, Michael's work was a great success, so I invited him over to celebrate and prepared a feast for him. I opened the car door, feeling a sense of relief. Grace can actually cook. It's just that I'm not the kind of person who makes her willing to step into the kitchen. Honey, did you hear that? Michael asked me to call you because he wants to have a few drinks with you, I said calmly. After hearing that, I immediately went back. Well, Michael and I will be waiting for you at home. Upon hearing this, I suddenly felt a sense of illusion. Grace and Michael seemed like the real couple while I was just a guest. I hung up the phone and walked back into the law firm. Please draft the divorce agreement now. In 3 days, it won't be possible. I can pay a little more, I said as I returned home with the divorce agreement. Michael approached me with a glass of red wine. His eyes filled with smugness. John Lee, Thank you for taking care of Grace all these years and helping her maintain such a great figure. Grace's cheeks turned slightly red as she lightly hit Michael. What are you talking about? Michael laughed. I'm speaking the truth. Everyone who saw your portrait actually thought you were just a young man. They never imagined you were already married. Grace responded, pretending to be angry. Stop it. That's annoying. If you keep saying that, I won't talk to you anymore. Watching their close interaction, I felt out of place. This is clearly my home, and Grace is my wife. Grace, I actually regret it. Michael gazed intensely at Grace. Over the years I spent abroad, I realized that while dreams are important, you are even more important. I decided to return to my country mainly because of you. A fleeting look of panic crossed Grace's face as she quickly glanced over. Why bring this up when it's all in the past? Michael shot me a disdainful look and said with a smile, Yes, it's all in the past. I simply replied with a faint smile. Then Michael said to me, John, I have something to tell you. Because my work was very successful at the art exhibition, the organizers decided to showcase it internationally. I want to take Grace with me, you don't mind, do you? Grace quickly replied, Honey, if you don't agree, I can stay behind. I shook my head and took out the divorce agreement. I have no objections, but I do have a small suggestion. Signing it would be best for you, me, and Michael. Are you asking for a divorce? Grace asked in disbelief. Michael looked at me with a sarcastic tone. John, this is really your fault. How can a grown man like you divorce Grace over such a trivial matter? Is your love for her not genuine? Grace frowned, not waiting for me to respond. Michael, can you say a little less? Grace, I'm thinking of you. All right, just stop talking. Grace impatiently turned to me and said, Honey, I know you're angry, so I don't blame you. I won't divorce you, just give me some time, and I will prove that I love you. After Grace finished speaking, she crumpled the divorce agreement and threw it into the trash can. I silently watched her, not saying a word. 5 years. I had cared for her with all my heart, yet failed to warm her heart. How many 5-year periods can one have in life? Could giving her a little more time really open her heart to me? I don't believe it. Moreover, can love for someone truly be proven? That night, Grace finished her shower, dressed in a black lace nightgown, and sat beside me. I could clearly smell the fragrance she emitted. Grace said, Honey, this pajamas is new. Do you think it looks good? As she spoke, she raised her leg and applied the lotion onto her skin. I didn't avoid her gaze, nor did I feel any fluttering emotions. I just looked on calmly. Grace has a great figure, and she looks beautiful in anything she wears. In her black lace pajamas, her fair skin glimmered enticingly, making her look especially charming. She took out a pair of stockings and carefully put them on, her eyes filled with allure. She asked me, Honey, didn't you say that you love stockings the most? I bought these specially for you. Do you like them? Grace has very beautiful legs, and I had always wanted to see her in stockings, but she had consistently refused. Now, she took the initiative to put on the stockings in front of me. But I could no longer feel my heart racing. I stood up, my tone calm. There is still a lot of work to handle tonight, so you'd better get some rest. Grace tried to hold me back, but I ignored her and walked straight into the study. Although she was very warm and welcoming, my heart had completely frozen over, like ice that would never melt. The next day, I got up from the small sofa in the study and stretched my stiff body. As I walked out of the study, Grace came out from the kitchen holding 2 bowls of porridge and greeted me with a sweet smile. Honey, hurry up and wash up. I've made your favorite white fungus treasure porridge. I frowned slightly. You don't need to do this. There is a need. I'm your wife, and it's my duty to cook. I'm not persuading you anymore. If Grace had realized sooner that I'm your wife, we wouldn't have ended up like this. At the dinner table, Grace said to me, Honey, let's have a baby. I was taken aback for a moment and asked, Why do you suddenly want to have a child? When we first got married, she mentioned that she wasn't planning on having kids for the time being. Although I like children, I didn't want to pressure her into it. It's been 5 years. My parents have been urging us, and since we've been married for 5 years now, It's time to consider having a baby. Sure. By the way, honey, today is the weekend. Shall we go back to the village to see Mom and Dad? Grace's eyes sparkled. Once I'm pregnant, I'll bring Mom and Dad to live with us. Okay? I didn't refuse to go see Mom and Dad. I didn't respond to what Grace said afterward. Just before we set off, Grace's phone kept ringing, and she looked at me. I told her it was fine to answer the call. I casually walked a little further away. Grace immediately answered the phone and switched to speaker mode. Michael's voice came through. Grace, are you ready? We can set off now. Grace awkwardly glanced at me and said, Michael, I'm not going abroad with you. You can go by yourself. I asked, is it because of John? Just give him the phone and I'll talk to him. She replied, no need for that. It's necessary, Grace, the organizers require your presence. This exhibition is crucial for my future, and I'm asking you to help me. Please. Grace seemed a bit troubled. I walked over with a smile and said, I've agreed for Grace. Grace let out a sigh of relief and quickly added, Honey, when I get back, I'll accompany you home to stay with Mom and Dad for a few days and spend some quality time with them. There won't be such a time anymore. I watched as Grace hurriedly dragged her suitcase out the door and took out her phone to call the lawyer, saying, help me get ready for the divorce proceedings. I returned to the village alone. My parents were happy to see me at first, but soon fell silent. My mom, displeased, asked, why did you come back alone? Where's Grace? I didn't want to tell them that I was going to divorce Grace, so I just smiled and said, she has some things to deal with, and it's the same if I come back alone. My mom muttered, how can that be the same? Can a son be compared to a daughter-in-law? Couldn't smile. Since Grace and I got married, my parents have treated her even better than they treated me. Whenever Grace and I had conflicts, my parents would always blame me first, never asking for details about what happened. However, Grace has never shown any affection towards them. My mom mentioned that we've been married for 5 years and it's time to consider having children, especially since couples in the village who married later than us already have kids. She glanced at me suspiciously and asked, is there any problem with your health? If there is, you should go to the hospital right away and not delay it. I was both amused and helpless, thinking to myself, Mom, you really overthink things. I told my mom that I was fine and healthy. She didn't say anything, but I could tell she really wanted to hold her grandchild. However, I had to let her down. Even though she was unhappy about me coming back alone, she still prepared a lavish meal for lunch. After eating, I strolled around the village by myself. In recent years, the villagers' lives have improved, and everyone has built new houses and bought cars. As I walked, I greeted the people on the road and breathed in the familiar air, which made me feel much better. On my way home in the evening, I ran into my middle school classmate, Emily Luo. Hey, it's you, little stutterer. Hey, it's you, little messy one. I shouted. She called me little stutterer, and I referred to her as little messy. In middle school, we were considered two personalities in our school. One was the stutterer, and the other was the messy one. I would always start stuttering after just a few sentences with strangers, while she was always dressed in loose clothing and had a slightly dirty face. Girls change a lot as they grow up. The little girl who once was has now transformed into a beautiful young woman. I smiled and said, I didn't expect that the once messy little girl has now become a beauty. I guess I'll have to change the way I address you. Emily shot me a glare and complained, you're the only one who still remembers that nickname. After saying this, she looked me up and down, revealing a surprised expression. You've changed so much. You used to blush when you spoke, and now you're actually making jokes. I fell silent, thinking of Grace. It's her who made me so different. Emily asked if I was reminded of something sad. I shook my head. It's all in the past. Emily encouraged me, patting my shoulder. Don't be unhappy. It's not often we get to meet, so come on. I'll treat you to some drinks. There is a restaurant in the village run by a relative of mine. When the owner saw us, he specially prepared 2 dishes for us. You got married? Emily looked at me in surprise. Don't you have one yet? Who would like a woman like me? I'm still single. I didn't expect that Emily, who is almost 30, is still not married. She mentioned that she plans to open a gym in the city soon. Initially, she intended to hire someone, but now that she has met me, it's perfect. Old classmate, do me a favor and design a management system for my gym. I raised my glass and smiled, saying, after taking your drinks, how could I refuse? Emily laughed heartily and introduced me to her gym's design concept, sharing her future plans as well. She mentioned that after years of hard work, she has come to understand one thing. Men can sometimes be reliable, but at other times they can't. If women want to have a good life, they need to have their own careers. I saw her glowing face and knew she was drunk. Let's go, I'll take you home. Emily hiccuped and said, what's the rush? I haven't had enough to drink yet. She turned to John and said, you, a big man, can't drink as much as I can? I shook my head with a wry smile and pulled Emily out of the restaurant. Since marrying Grace, I haven't drunk alcohol anymore because she hates the smell of it. Tonight is the first time in 5 years that I've made an exception to take Emily home. She held my hand and asked, are you going back to the city tomorrow? Can I come with you? I agreed to her request. Just then, my phone rang. It was a WeChat message from Grace. Honey, it should be dark back home now. Don't stay up too late and get some rest. I'll be back soon. Love you. This isn't the first message she sent me on WeChat. She sent one before boarding the plane and another after landing. She also sent a message while resting at the hotel, specifically mentioning that she was staying alone. She seemed to be informing me about her plans. I didn't reply because I knew that if a couple had to report everything to each other, it would mean a loss of trust. This marriage should come to an end. The next morning, I was awakened by Grace's phone call. Honey, how did you sleep last night? Did you dream about me? I did dream about you. I didn't respond. Grace said to her husband, hang in there a little longer. I'll be back soon. At that moment, Michael asked on the phone, Grace, are you ready? We're about to head to the exhibition center. She quickly said to me, honey, I can't talk right now. I'll call you when I get back. I looked at the disconnected call, feeling surprisingly calm. After having the breakfast prepared by my mom, Emily and I headed back to the city together. On the way, she seemed a bit embarrassed to ask me, did I drink too much last night? Did I say a lot of unreliable things? I asked her with a serious expression. Emily's face turned red instantly, and she quickly explained, I wasn't targeting you. I was talking about other men. Don't misunderstand. Seeing her embarrassed look, I couldn't help but laugh. You did that on purpose, didn't you? She playfully hit me in shame and then turned her head away in annoyance. I said, don't be mad. I just wanted to make you smile. Humph. I'll treat you to a meal that should help you feel better, right? Emily turned her head, her tone a bit proud. That sounds more like it. I drove Emily back to her rented apartment in the city and then accompanied her to check out the gym that was under renovation. As an old classmate, how long do you think it would take to design a management system? It's been about a month. Since I still have to work, I can only do this after getting off work, roughly around this time. Alright, let's stick to a month, and after it's done, I'll treat you to a big meal. I smiled and said, well, I won't hold back then. So, I started shuttling between home, the office, and Emily's gym. To discuss the details of the management system, Emily and I often meet, which has deepened my understanding of her. Although she is no longer messy, she remains quite carefree. She frequently wears dresses and has a habit of sitting with her legs apart when she's in front of me, seemingly unconcerned about any potential wardrobe malfunctions. This makes me feel a bit awkward. Grace still messages me every day, sharing her daily activities and the people she meets. I read every message, but I never reply. I have grown accustomed to returning home after work to an empty house, to a life without her. On the day the management system was completed, Emily mentioned that she wanted to treat me to a nice meal to fulfill her promise. I didn't expect her to bring the ingredients to my home. The dishes from outside are nothing special. Today, I'll show you my cooking skills. Sure, let's see Emily's cooking skills. After spending more time with Emily, I feel increasingly relaxed around her, which is a nice feeling. When I'm with Grace, I always have to be mindful of her emotions and cannot speak freely. While Emily is busy in the kitchen, I'm in the living room watching TV, eagerly anticipating her delicious dishes. I didn't expect Grace to come back tonight. Grace looked at me in disbelief and asked, "Honey, who is she?" Michael immediately accused me, saying, "John, how can you do this to Grace? She's been thinking about you while she's been abroad, and it hasn't been long since she left before you found someone new. Grace really trusted the wrong person." Michael tried to take Grace's hand and said, "Grace, let's go." But Grace didn't move. She just looked at me, her face filled with disappointment and sadness. She said, "Honey, I want to hear your explanation." I stopped Emily and calmly said, "There's nothing to explain. As you can see, I found someone new. Grace, it's over for us." Upon hearing this, Grace's tears instantly streamed down her face, and she covered her mouth before running out. "John, that's really great." Michael shot me a fierce glare and then turned to chase after Grace. "Grace, wait for me." I slowly let out a sigh of relief, knowing that everything would come to an end now. "Aren't you going to give me an explanation?" Emily looked at me angrily. I gave a wry smile. "Grace is my wife, but we are separated," I added. "Was it because of that man just now?" I shook my head. Not entirely because of him. He was just a trigger. Without him, my marriage with Grace would still be hard to maintain. If two hearts can't come together, forcing them to stay together won't last long. Emily frowned. "But I think Grace likes you." "Maybe so." I didn't want to say much. I didn't cherish what I had when I had it, and now that I've lost it, I regret it. "It's too late." Grace called. "Honey, I won't give up. Even if you no longer love me and have someone else in your heart, I will still try my best to win you back." However, that night, I received a video showing her and Michael together, lying in bed without clothes. Outside, it was pouring rain when Grace opened the door, soaked and out of breath, shouting, "Honey!" She suddenly threw herself into my arms, tears streaming down her face. "Forgive me." I know what she was saying. I gently pushed her away, turned around, and went into the room to grab a dry towel for her. "Wipe yourself off," I said. Grace shook her head vigorously, her voice tinged with tears. "Honey, I hope you can believe me. What happened tonight was not intentional. It was just an accident. I got drunk out of sorrow and ended up having an affair with Michael. I didn't actively wrong you." Grace held my hand tightly, her eyes filled with pleading. I believe she was speaking the truth. What happened tonight was an accident. But what about before? On the day of our 5th wedding anniversary, she posed as a nude model for Michael. At that moment, my marriage was over. "Just go back," I said softly, breaking away from Grace's hand. "I'll send you the divorce papers later. I wish you and Michael happiness." "No, I don't want a divorce," Grace shouted angrily. I looked at her calmly and asked, "Why bother? Why make both sides uncomfortable when we can part on good terms?" I had made up my mind and had already submitted the divorce application to the court. Grace was in shock. On the day I received the court summons, Grace finally agreed to divorce me. We went to the Civil Affairs Bureau together. She was wearing a bright dress and had done her makeup beautifully, but I noticed that her face was pale and her expression tired. She smiled and said, "Honey, this is the last time I'll call you that. Can we still be friends after the divorce?" I didn't look at her. Instead, I turned my gaze to the window and replied softly, "I don't want you to be misunderstood by Michael." She didn't cry, but tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. As we walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Grace held me tightly. "Don't move. Let me hold you for a moment." Hearing her humble tone, my heart was touched. "John, thank you for loving me." I feel her holding me tightly, as if she wants to merge with my body. The entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau is bustling with activity. I don't want to be seen as a joke all the time, so I gently pushed Grace. "Let's go." But she didn't speak. Instead, she tightened her fist and punched me right in the heart. Seeing the look of surprise on my face, she smiled brilliantly. "I've left my mark in your heart, so you'll never forget me." Grace left. The moment she got into the taxi and drove away, I felt as if raindrops were falling on my face. I dipped my hand in and took a taste, only to find it salty. Turned out she was crying. Emily called me, saying, "Are you busy right now? If not, could you come and help me? I'm struggling to cope on my own." Okay. I put away the divorce certificate and drove to Emily's gym. Time can heal everything, including the pain in my heart. A month later, all the preparations for Emily's gym were finished. I asked her when she planned to open it. She said that a week later, she would start by distributing some flyers and then advertise online. After saying that, she looked at me, indicating that she wanted to thank me for my help. Without me, the gym setup wouldn't have gone so quickly. I smiled and asked how she planned to thank me. "Last time I didn't get to taste your cooking. How about another try?" "No, I have a better idea." "What is it?" Emily smiled mysteriously, and then I felt a warm sensation on my lips. I was stunned. This is my way of showing gratitude. What do you think? Under the night sky, a blush appeared on Emily's face. Absolutely beautiful. 2 days before the gym opened, Grace suddenly came to me, her face filled with tears. "John, can you help me?" I immediately asked her what had happened. Grace, in tears, revealed the truth to me. After she and I divorced, she did not end up with Michael, but he kept pestering her every day. At first, he merely asked her to accompany him to meet clients, but his demands grew increasingly forceful. Just a couple of days ago, he even pressured her to entertain his so-called clients with her body. My expression darkened. Michael's behavior took me by surprise. "Call the police, he has threatened you, and that is already against the law." Grace seemed to find support and held my hand tightly. "You go with me." After Grace testified, the police quickly took action. When Michael was arrested, he became very agitated and accused me and Grace of having an improper relationship. He said, "John, you're already divorced. Why are you still interfering in my affairs?" I knew there were still feelings between you two. "Grace, you're truly a disloyal person to treat me this way. I was so good to you, and yet you betrayed me." Grace was shaking with anger. I ignored Michael and pulled her out of the police station. He was like a lost dog without an owner, not worth our concern. Once we were outside, I comforted Grace. She was in tears, saying she never expected him to insult her that way and that she had misplaced her trust. Then Grace looked at me and said, "John, I only just realized that you're the only one who truly loves me." I sensed that she had more to say, so I chose not to interrupt her. Her lips moved slightly, but in the end, she didn't say anything more and just looked down. "Take me home, all right?" It was the opening day of Emily's gym, and I was invited to participate in the ribbon-cutting ceremony. In the crowd, I saw Grace. She was wearing the dress I had proposed to her in, with light makeup on. At that moment, I cut the colorful ribbon in front of me, and she applauded enthusiastically with those around her, smiling happily. I smiled at her and squeezed Emily's hand tightly beside me. Cherish the people around you. Today marks the opening day of Emily's gym. When I learned that John would be cutting the ribbon with Emily, I put on an outfit I hadn't worn in 5 years and applied some light makeup. Seeing him hold the scissors, standing nervously next to Emily, made me smile. He still isn't quite comfortable in situations like this. He hasn't changed in the past 5 years. I am the one who has changed. He holds Emily's hand tightly, and she is smiling happily by his side. But that place was originally mine. I was the one who let it slip away. On the day I left the police station, I wanted to ask him if there was still a chance to start over. But in the end, I couldn't bring myself to say it. I'm sorry for him. Goodbye, my dear. I wish you happiness.